This week on Quality Digest Live, coaching with the boss. No, not Springsteen. And also a look at Olympus's Vanta Handheld XRF XRD analyzer. That and more when we come back. And welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 13th, 2017. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Dusharme, Editor-in-Chief for Quality Digest, and my co-host, Mike Richmond, is on holiday this week. He's in Florida, which I think is having a lot nicer weather than we are seeing here in Northern California. Have fun, Mike. Looking forward to seeing you back next week. Okay, our first story today is about FDA drug facility inspections. Mostly about foreign inspections here. About 40% of the FDA's drug inspections are in the European Union. But even at that, the FDA is not really able to keep up with the inspections of all foreign drug manufacturers. It's a daunting task. I mean, there's a lot of them, and the FDA just doesn't have enough manpower to get to all of them really on a timely basis. But one thing that could help speed things up and lower costs is FDA's Mutual Reliance Initiative, the MRI. The concept is pretty simple, writes Dara Corrigan, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's Associate Commissioner for Global Regulatory Policy. In her article, The FDA Mutual Reliance Initiative, A New Path for Pharmaceutical Inspections in Europe and Beyond, Corrigan describes how the MRI works. European Union country inspectors inspect in their respective countries. The FDA inspects the manufacturing facilities in the United States, and then the EU and the FDA rely upon each other's inspection. I mean, that's really it in a nutshell. They trust each other's inspections, and so they don't have to do their own. Now, according to Corrigan, this would avoid duplication of effort. You wouldn't have an EU inspector from Europe going to a country and then the FDA coming in and inspecting the same company. You would have just one inspection. This would lower costs, and also more important, I think, is would enable regulators to devote more resources to other parts of the world where there is greater risk. Because part of the problem right now is with all these inspections going on, a lot of them, the FDA has to go in and inspect, let's say, some company in the European Union, and it's a company that already has a good track record and so forth. I mean, if it had already been inspected by somebody from the EU, the FDA could trust that, and they could spend their time looking at like burgeoning drug facilities, drug manufacturers coming up in China or India and so forth, something that needs maybe a little bit more inspection, but they can't do that. Now, as part of the MRI, the FDA and the EU assembled teams to assess the risk and benefits of entering into this type of mutual recognition agreement. The FDA was invited to observe the EU's joint audit program, in which 2 EU nations audit the inspectorate or the regulatory authority of another member. So in other words, they look at how regulators do their jobs and how well they do it. The FDA first observed the audit of Sweden's inspectorate by auditors from the United Kingdom and Norway. Since then, the FDA has observed an additional 12 audits of drug inspectorates across the EU, with more observations planned through 2017. Now, this unprecedented access allows FDA observers, writes Corrigan, to gather firsthand knowledge of the laws that govern EU GMP, good manufacturing practice, drug inspections, and how inspectorates manage the drug inventory with their own respective borders. It also provides a unique opportunity to understand the regulatory framework in the EU. Now, keep in mind, what's going on here is the FDA and the EU want to get comfortable with each other. The FDA wants to have confidence that if they're going to accept an inspection that was done by an EU regulatory body, that they have confidence in how things are done there. And that's what all this is about. It's kind of a vetting process is the way I look at it. There's 28 member states, 27 after Britain leaves the EU, and so there can be a lot of differences that the FDA has to understand. So that's why this process is going on. So this all sounds really good, right? I mean, let's trust each other's agencies and not have multiple agencies inspecting the same drug manufacturer. It's going to save money not only for the regulatory agencies, fewer inspections, but also for the companies being inspected. There's going to be no duplication of effort and better use of resources. So let's do it, right? Why not? Well, we'll see. It's a good idea. It's still moving forward, but the MRI is one of the key components of the pharmaceutical sector covered in the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP. If that doesn't sound familiar, it's one of those trade deals, right? And as we know, President-elect Trump is not a fan of a lot of these trade deals, including, let's say, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. He is expected to not be a fan of the TTIP either. So some expect that the MRI could be stopped in its tracks. However, Corrigan says the MRI could take another path if the initiative progresses more quickly than the trade negotiations. So in other words, read between the lines here, if the MRI, the things that they're doing right now with the MRI to kind of vet the process, make sure the process works, the negotiations that are going on with it. If that progresses faster than negotiations of the TTIP, or even if the TTIP gets torpedoed, there may still be hope for the MRI. If not, then I think you can expect that the FDA will continue to struggle to keep up with foreign drug manufacturers, and basically we'll be where we are right now. All right, here is a quick and easy coaching article from Jonathan Whistman. In his article, How to Quickly Evaluate Coaching Needs by Being Boss, B-O-S-S, Whistman points out that a coaching challenge manufacturers often face is that we often end up coaching about something that happened recently. Something goes on and now we feel have to kind of bring that employee up to speed. Or maybe it's something that most stands out in our mind. And doing this rather than coaching on what would most affect the future results of the person we need to coach. And in other words, our coaching is often more reactive than proactive. And as we know, reactive anything is never the best way to do something. You really want to be proactive in what you're doing. That includes coaching. So what do? Well, Whistman gives 4 suggestions for coaching wrapped around the acronym BOSS, B-O-S-S, for behavior, outlook, skills, and stature. And we'll kind of go over those real quick here. So first up is behavior. What are the behaviors of your team members, asks Whistman. That is, what they do, not how they do it. What are the critical behavior activities the person needs to be involved in for success? For a salesperson, for instance, it might include the number of calls or the contacts that she makes and the email she sends. It would also, or could include things like eating, drinking, and exercise, says Whistman. How organized is a person? How well does he or she use available resources? So taking a close look at behaviors might provide an area rich for coaching. And as Whistman says, it doesn't matter how great someone is at something if he never actually does it. Skills are one thing, carrying out the skills is another. What are their behaviors? Next, outlook. Whistman believes that a person's outlook has the biggest effect on results. It's how someone feels in any given moment. And as you know, that can change from hour to hour or day to day. It could be the outlook toward oneself. How does that employee feel towards themselves? It could be their outlook on the marketplace or the economy or the competition, the company, or it could be their outlook toward you, their manager, or any other person. It's important to stay in touch with the changing outlooks of team members. And how do you do that? Well, how about listening, right? What are your employees saying? Or maybe what aren't they saying? This doesn't get talked about a lot. Obviously, if you're listening to employees and they're talking to you, you have communication, you know what they're saying. But very often, there's a rhythm to conversation. We know how conversations should go. We know that we say certain things. We're going to get some sort of feedback. We're going to get some sort of conversation flowing. If you say something, or if a topic comes up and somebody is silent or they deflect, so what they're saying is just as important as what they're not saying. And you got to investigate that. Talk to your team members. Open up those lines of communication. Understand their outlook, and you'll be able to be way ahead in performance. Third is skills. That's the first S, skills. This is how your team members do something. It's their skill level. This could be sales skills, their use of technology, really anything that pertains to them doing their job well. People can be working hard, but not effectively. You know, that adage, work smart, not hard. Now, that's the same idea, right? When you're evaluating coaching needs, you might ask yourself, is there a particular skill that person needs to improve? If the answer is yes, well, then that is a long-term coaching project for you, right? Bring them up in those skills. Make sure they know what they're doing in their job. And finally, this one I think is really interesting. We don't talk about it much, and that is stature. Where the first three behaviors, outlook, skills, behavior, outlook, and skills are pretty obvious. This one isn't, and by stature, Whistman means the essence of how people are viewed by others. How do others perceive this employee? This is a real touchy-feely thing. It's important, particularly if you have customer-facing employees. This could be related to their look, their physical presence. It could be their online presence. How do they come across? You might have a lot of employees that work strictly online. It could be phone. It could be social media. How do they come across? Anything that changes the way that person is viewed by others is important to your company if they are customer-facing employees. If they need to be respected, do they have the demeanor of a trusted advisor? Is the way others view them commensurate with how they need to be viewed to be enjoying the highest level of success and cooperation from others? And really, stature and how people view your employees, this is a tricky one, and I think perhaps maybe fraught with some legal issues if you're not careful on how you do it. It's one thing to coach someone on their skills or behavior. It's another thing to start talking about and bringing up how they dress or their tone. What's tone, right? I don't like your tone. What does that mean, right? And so forth. I mean, a lot of this can be as much a reflection of the manager's attitudes and perception as it is the employees. Food for thought. But this is, in any case, some good suggestions from Jonathan Whistman. Just remember, boss when coaching behavior, outlook, skills, and stature. Okay. Next story, a U.S. Air National Guard veteran, a high school dropout, a person with background in sales, and a family man who hadn't been in a classroom for 20 years. 4 men on very different paths that ultimately led to one destination. So starts John Killam's Training Students for New Opportunities and New Lives. The one destination that Killam is talking about that these students were all heading for was the Massachusetts Manufacturing Extension Partnership, MASMEP, their accelerated CNC program. They were being trained up to be CNC operators, very disparate people from different walks of life. And this is part of a solution to the skills gap problem that we often talk about on this show. According to Killam, manufacturers across Massachusetts need technically trained workers, and they are concerned over the shortage of such workers in the pipeline. Now, we've talked about this before, and in MassMep's case, what Killam is seeing is that baby boomers are retiring, and the number of CNC machine operators is declining rapidly, according to Killam. So MassMep and its partners have developed this accelerated CNC program. It's an intense 280-hour, 8-week training program that attracts men and women from all ages and backgrounds, with or without past manufacturing or machining experience. Participants are able to graduate with recognized credentials and college credits, as well as lean manufacturing and OSHA certifications. So look at what's going on here. There's this need in Massachusetts. So MassMep has stepped up at the bequest of manufacturers in the area on complaints from them that they're lacking skilled CNC operators to start this program in order to feed those people into the pipeline. This is part of an ongoing effort across the United States in many different ways to address the skills gap issue. So whether it's partnering with companies, partnering with community colleges or high schools to get this training into the pipeline, whether it's starting their own Voc Tech programs at a company, or it's somebody like a third party like MassMep starting their own programs in order to get people in and get them trained up in the skills that are lacking right now as baby boomers retire. So in this particular program, no matter what their background was, the accelerated CNC program was providing or is providing new opportunities for people who want a career change, or they're looking for a career, or they're out of work and really need a good job, and CNC operators get paid pretty darn well. And it's feeding this pipeline for companies that need those operators. Now, one of the examples that Killam gives is Christopher Campbell, who spent 2 years in college, followed by some time in the Army in Germany as a petroleum supply specialist. He also spent several years in the restaurant industry before he and his wife returned to Worcester, Massachusetts to raise their family. So in 2015, he began the accelerated CNC training classes offered by MassMep. He was a 37-year-old father and husband who'd been unemployed for 5 months and out of school for nearly 20 years, 2 decades. So as you can imagine, he was a little nervous about going back into, let's say, school again. He had no idea what to expect. But because the way the program is structured, and it's really geared toward people like Campbell, after a few weeks, things started to click for him, especially when the training got to actual hands-on CNC training on the machine. So as part of the program, MassMep hosted a job fair, inviting several local manufacturers with employment needs. This allowed potential employers to meet with each of the 11 candidates in that class face-to-face and determine who they would like to invite for more in-depth on-site interviews before the group even graduated. Campbell had 4 interviews and 2 job offers. So not so bad. So far, the accelerated CNC program has trained 326 programs for careers in manufacturing. Like I said, this is how industry responds to employment needs. If you can't find who you want, you make them. Be part of the pipeline. Don't whine about there not being people with the skills you need. That may be true, it is true, but you can do something about it. Be part of the organization like the MEP, start your own training program or apprenticeship programs. Plenty of companies are doing that. There's a skills shortage and we all need to be involved in addressing it. All right, our last segment this week is a tech corner that was recorded when we had an in-house webinar with Olympus on their Vanta handheld XRF XRD analyzer. While they were here doing the webinar, we said, hey, you're here, you got your equipment, let's do a tech corner. And so here it is. This is our tech corner with Dianne Hillhouse of Olympus showing us the Vanta handheld XRF XRD analyzer. We have in the studio with us today Dianne Hillhouse of Olympus. And Dianne, you're going to be showing us an XRF analyzer, right?
Right.
And what in the world is an XRF analyzer?
So this is what one looks like. This is Olympus's newest XRF analyzer, the Vanta. Okay. And so XRF stands for X-ray fluorescence. And this is also known as a PMI analyzer or a PMI gun, and it's used for positive material identification of metals and alloys in a fabrication or a plant maintenance setting.
Okay, and you said X-ray, so is this literally shoot X-rays out the front like a little ray gun or something?
It does, but it's very low level X-rays, so it's very safe. And the way it works is we produce X-rays through an X-ray tube down here. So when I pull the trigger, I'm sending very low level X-rays into the sample, but enough energy to excite the sample, and enough that the sample itself will send back its own characteristic X-rays. And then the analyzer takes these characteristic X-rays and it determines what element on the periodic table or elements in the periodic table are in the sample. Okay. And then it determines the concentration. And it can do this in metals and alloys. It can do this in plastics and glass and soil. Okay,
so it's not just metals then. I was kind of under the impression that these things were basically metals, but you're saying a wide array of elements.
Right, metals and alloys, it's the most common application or common usage, but we can take a look at elements in pretty much any type of sample as long as there's enough of that element that the analyzer can detect it.
Okay, now I notice this obviously is a handheld unit, so I'm assuming it's portable and you're going to take it into the field, you're going to take it on the shop floor. I know it's a precision instrument, so is it rugged?
Absolutely. The Vanta is very rugged, and that's the number one request from customers.
Okay.
I mean, they've been around for a while, and again, it's like a laboratory unit in your hand. So the next phase is, can we have a rugged unit? That's what everybody's been asking for, and the Vanta is actually, we put it through some very rigid. I mean, in addition to the design, we put it through a very rigorous testing protocols.
Okay.
One of them is a U.S. Department of Defense Mil Standard 810G 4-foot drop test.
Okay.
And again, we're not encouraging anybody to drop an instrument.
Kind of throw it out there onto the floor?
Right. But in those type of environments, like the foundries, steel mills, petrochem refineries.
Sure, they get banged around.
They're going to get banged around. They're going to get occasionally dropped. Hopefully not dropped a lot, but it does happen. So if it gets dropped, I mean, hopefully you'll be able to keep on going.
Now,
what's
the IP rating on this?
So there's an IP65 rating.
Okay.
that protects it against high velocity water and dust. And what I was also going to mention earlier is in that failure testing that we did, we also tested all the moving parts, anything that might be broken during usage. Okay. And for example, the trigger was tested over 1.5 million times, which is more than you'll ever pull the trigger.
I think my finger would probably wear out before the trigger wore out.
That's right.
1.5 million times. Wow.
We wanted to make sure.
Yeah. So all the moving parts are tested extensively. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it seems to me, we mentioned earlier this is a precision instrument. You told me that before the show. And now you've just said it's rugged. It seems to me those are kind of at odds with each other. I mean, how do you guarantee or make sure that the accuracy is there even after this unit's been banged around as we've just said it can be? Right.
So that's the balance, right? And it's the most important part of the instrument. Obviously, to do your job every day, it has to be accurate and precise. And then the ruggedness is a bonus. I mean, it really helps with the cost of ownership. But in order to do that, you have to have a very stable instrument. So in the Vanta, we've incorporated a couple things. We are using very ultra-low noise electronics coupled with a new quad-core processor. It's called our Axon technology.
So quad-core, it's very fast processor.
Very fast. Okay. So those coupled together give you the lowest detection limits on elements. It gives you the fastest answers. It gives you the best repeatability, and then it gives you the best reproducibility over different instruments.
Okay. Show us how it works.
Sure.
So if we can switch over to the gauge cam here, guys. Excellent.
Okay. So we're going to test.
Okay, so this looks some sort of extruded bar that you've just put this down on.
Right.
Okay, and that looks like just your basic, like a smartphone screen.
It is. That's another thing with the Vanta. We've designed it with an environment that everybody's used to, your smartphone, where you're swiping from reading to reading or up and down. Your most used operations are down here in your favorites tray, and if they're not in your favorites tray, they're no more than 2 swipes or 2 buttons away.
Okay.
So we're going to
So you're just going to pull the trigger there. All right. So I notice you put this right down on the sample.
As close as you can.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Now, so this comes back with now I notice here at the top, is that actually telling me what this alloy actually is?
It is. So we talked about the analyzer obtaining a chemistry from a sample, getting the element of interest and then the concentration of that element. And then the next thing it does is tries to match it against a library of known alloys. We have the industry standards for over 750 alloys in the analyzer. They're most commonly used in the maintenance and manufacturing markets, although it is customizable. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to match the chemistry to an industry spec. And you can see we have a nice graphical display. It's color coded. If you're in the green, you're definitely within the industry spec for that element. If you're in the yellow, you're within spec, within the margin of error. And then if you're in red, you're out of spec.
Okay.
So you can see this like the chrome is kind of right on the edge.
Right
there.
on the edge. So if you were taking multiple samples, you have a shipment comes in from a vendor, and you're measuring multiple samples, and you see that they're reliably showing up maybe really on the edge. In this case, for the chromium, that might indicate you want to do further testing, more extensive testing on your part, or maybe just contact the manufacturer and say, hey, I'm consistently reading, kind of on the low end on the chromium, right? And
Right. Your quality manager in a manufacturing situation, or your reliability manager out in a plant, they're going to have protocols for things like that. I mean, you're using the analyzer to verify the chemistry against a mill test report or an MTR. You want to make sure your supplier has sent you what you asked for and what they said. They said they sent you out in a plant. You want to make sure that your supplier sent you, the right component before you install it.
Sure. So it's a good quality assurance, quality control tool. Now I notice, obviously, I'm assuming all this data obviously is being stored within the unit. So somebody goes out on the shop floor, out in the field, they take a bunch of measurements, all that data is stored in here. What happens with that data?
I'm glad you asked. Data management is extremely important in manufacturing maintenance situations. When you invest in one of these analyzers, it's not normally just to pull the trigger and see what the answer is. I mean, it's about archiving that data and having a historical record. It's traceability. It's creating a report.
Or maybe even just further analysis.
Right, it's all those things. And so the Vanta actually has several ways to really easily download and export this data. And I want to show you our I/O port up here. So it has several different ways. Pretty much any way that you want to download the data, any situation you're in, you can download it via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. There's a flash drive. You can directly connect it to your computer. There's an SD card. So you should be able to get the data off this very
pretty
easily.
much any way you want, yeah.
And additionally to doing it that way, it's also cloud enabled, which is obviously used more and more now, and it's definitely the way of the future.
So you could upload your data, program this to upload your data directly to wherever. I mean,
that's right.
Doesn't necessarily have to be Olympus, a third-party cloud service, whatever, right?
Right.
Okay.
Olympus has its own cloud site where you can securely store and access data. You could use a third-party cloud site. You could use
maybe even a network drive or something like that as well? Okay,
exactly. And so it's not just for data, but you can use it for your fleet management. You can use it, that's where you're going to get your software upgrades, your firmware upgrades, your library upgrades. So there are many, many possibilities for this
And
cloud
it looks like
technology.
very simple to use. An operator could be trained up on this pretty quick.
Absolutely. The user interface that we talked about earlier, that's one of the nice things about it, because it is an environment, a modern user interface that everybody's used to. It's very easy to train on. If you use the analyzer every single day, or you only use it once a month, it's very easy to get your proficiency on par to where it needs to be, no matter how often you use it. It's very, very easy to use.
All right, perfect. Well, this was the Vanta XRF Analyzer. Dianne, thanks for joining us in the studio this morning. If you want more information on the Vanta XRF, there is a link underneath the player page. Click on that. That'll take you out to the Vanta page on the Olympus site, and you can read more about it. Dianne, thanks a lot. And thanks again to Dianne, Hillhouse, and Olympus for coming out here and recording that segment. If you want more information on the Vanta, you can click the Vanta link that's underneath the player page down there. Okay, before we go today, it's time for Tweet of the Week. This week's tweet is from, no, not Donald Trump, but Charles Pascalar. Pascalar tweets, "Only those who can see the invisible can achieve the impossible." Well, that's it for us today. Train your eyes to see the invisible. We'll see you again next week. So long.